a general election. Jonathan?
Okay, thanks, BZ. Well, joining me in studio tonight to talk about this is Zahr Ahmed. She is the executive director of the Republican Muslim Coalition, and Amer, a law professor at the University of Detroit. Thank you both for being with me tonight. So, Amer, I want to start with you. Why this flip? Donald Trump aside, ignoring Donald Trump and his recent statements, why have we seen American Muslims switch from Republican to Democrat?
Well, the Democratic Party has traditionally been a party that protects minority rights more, especially in the last 20 or 30 years. And I mean, just take a look at the audience in any Democratic Party event at the Democratic National Convention. It's a real mosaic of what America is turning into. And you take a look at any Republican event, and especially at a Trump rally, and you know, they're 99% white. So Muslims as minorities and Arabs as well are more drawn to the party that seems to have its arms open to people of color a lot more.
But the argument is that Muslim ideals and Republican ideals often align in a lot of cases, and that Republicans are generally pro-family, pro-choice, pro-small business. So why the disconnect?
Well, I mean, you could say the same thing about black voters, Latino voters. Those segments of the voting population also tend to be what we might consider more conservative in their social views, but they all go much more towards the Democratic Party. And that just goes to show you that inclusion and policies and walking the walk about having these people in your party is much more important than simply talking the talk about certain policy things that many people in our community might agree with.
All right, so Zahr, let me get to you, because you're kind of an interesting story here. You used to be a Democrat for the most part, and then you flipped to become a Republican American Muslim. Why were you drawn to the GOP?
Because of GOP's stance on pro-life, pro-Islamic values that I felt that the party represents. The party platform is supposed to be about traditional family values, like you said, and pro-life. Issues that I cared about aligned more with the Republican Party than the Democrats. I couldn't see myself supporting some of the major issues promoted, liberal values promoted by the Democratic Party.
And now when you look at the Republican Party today with Donald Trump at the lead, what do you think of him?
Well, we're working on Donald Trump. I would love to see him change his views on Islam and Muslims. I feel he has strong economic policies that he could really help turn the economy around. But I think the bigotry and hatred coming out of a lot of GOP candidates against Muslims is very concerning, and that's exactly why we formed Republican Muslim Coalition, to reach out to a lot of their GOP presidential candidates and help hopefully change their views.
So does your loyalty to Republicans end at Donald Trump? I mean, if he does become the party's nominee, would you still vote for him?
I would.
You would?
I would, because I didn't become a Republican because of Donald Trump. I still don't see myself supporting a Democrat. We've seen failed foreign policies in the last 8 years, and we'd like to see that change. Yes, the rhetoric coming around is very concerning. That's exactly why we have a huge opportunity for Republican Muslims to educate Republican politicians about what we want. Just like any other group, we should be lobbying for our interests and make our voices heard in the highest powers in Washington, D.C.
You know, Amer, I wonder if that's a concern for you as well, the lobbying effort, that there really isn't a clear, strong voice for Muslim Americans in the political process.
Well, I mean, I think our vote is our voice. Remember, Muslim Americans are a young, highly educated segment of the population, very keen on political issues, especially nowadays. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me to hear a Muslim American say that even if Trump gets the Republican nomination, that she would still vote for him. I mean, that's like a black American saying they would vote for George Wallace. I mean, it's unbelievable. Trump is the party now, and the Trump movement and the Republican movement are now becoming almost exclusively the party of white Americans who feel that they're losing their country to non-white Americans.
But you know,
and I don't know how anyone can believe in that.
But Amer, a lot of Republicans say, listen, although Donald Trump is extremely popular, he does not speak for all Republicans, and that there are a lot of other Republicans, Jeb Bush being one of them, that have spoken out against Trump and have struck a far more moderate tone.
Well, I mean, I guess we'll really see when the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primaries happen, but indications now are that he's leading and that he might win both of those. And if he does, we really have to look at ourselves in the mirror in this country and say, we have to take a stand. You know, I would disagree with Saba in thinking that hanging out with people like Donald Trump and hoping that they get more educated about us is not the way to change their mind. The way to change their mind is to challenge them morally and ethically on their stances. We need to work to eradicate the way racism works in this country and not try to appease it by behaving nicely.
So Saba, let me get a reaction to that. Does he raise a good point?
I agree, and that's exactly why we're meeting with Donald Trump later this month. I feel like he needs to meet with Muslim Americans. We're having an interfaith meeting of imams and evangelical Christian pastors meeting with Donald Trump here in New York City.
So you will be meeting with Donald Trump?
Yes, we will.
And imams will be there as well?
Yes, we're trying to coordinate a meeting later this month. I got confirmation from his campaign manager, Corey, and we're working towards building that. And we'd like to see him visit a mosque later down in the next few months, probably March or April. I mean, I think you're not going to change Donald Trump's mind overnight. And the only way you're ever going to change any politician's mind is if you sit on the table with them and have discussions, just like we host Hillary Clinton fundraisers. Why can't we host Carson, Trump, Cruz, invite them over to our homes and educate them about our policies?
Well, the argument is that Carson or Troop don't want, really, the fear is they don't want anything to do with Muslim Americans. That's at least the perception that a lot of Muslims have.
But I have met with Carson and I have met with Cruz. I have met with a lot of these. We're hosting fundraisers for them. If we get active politically the way every other politically active group gets their voices heard in Congress, we have no barriers. I don't see this as a country open to everyone, and I feel like we're exercising our political rights just like anybody else.
You know, Amer, that's a concern that I hear often, is that Muslim Americans are not being active enough politically, and that politicians on both sides of the aisle are not doing all they can to try to reach out to Muslim Americans, to try to fight Islamophobia. One complaint I hear is that the fact that President Obama has not himself visited a mosque in the United States. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, look, we could always do more in our community. That you can never be politically active enough. But I wouldn't say that it's a totally fair criticism to say that we're not politically active. We are. We have a lot of advocacy groups. There are a lot of Muslim Americans involved in politics, even if they're involved in the Republican Party. And there are a lot of Muslim Americans getting involved with their vote. In fact, in the past 15 or 20 years, the amount of Muslim Americans registered to vote has gone up a lot. A lot more Muslim Americans are voting, and they're voting overwhelmingly for the Republican Party.
Right,
I mean, for the Democratic Party. For the Democratic Party.
But does it go beyond that, where some of the responsibility should lie with politicians, for instance, with President Obama, to try to reach out more to the Muslim community, to include them more in politics?
Well, I mean, you know, as someone who comes from the Muslim community, I wish that President Obama would come out and say, especially attacking those who still, remember, there's a large swath of Republican voters that still label him a Muslim, to come out, and it would be nice if he came out and said, you know, I'm not a Muslim, but so what if I were? Those would be magical words for our community. And he hasn't done that. It'd be great if he did. But I don't think that discounts, especially the speech that he made about a month ago, when he talked about making sure that Muslims are seen as part of the American fabric as much as anybody else and fighting out against Islamophobia. You don't hear that kind of stuff coming from the leading Republican contenders right now. To say that you want to sit down with Carson and Trump and talk to them, these are people who have said no Muslim should ever be president, and we should surveil all the mosques and register all the Muslims. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Only because they have no Muslim advisors. Why don't I see Muslim Americans on their campaign trail? I see Muslims on Democratic campaign managers. Abedin is.
That plays precisely to his point that's why they're leaning more. Muslims are leaning more towards the Democratic side.
Right.
Because Republicans don't seem to embrace minorities.
Well, of course, we're going to face challenges, but I feel like if we're aligned with our Islamic values, which align with the Republican Party, we should have an equal balance in reaching out to both sides of the aisle. But especially for Republican
Well, you know, Islamic values are also about justice, freedom, equality. These are universal
Which are Republican values. I'm a proud Republican.
These are things that are much more espoused by the Democratic Party today in America than by the Republican Party. The Republican Party, like I said, is very quickly coming the party of ethnic isolation, of having a country, make America great again. We all know make America great again means make America white again.
Well, Amer, let me jump in real quickly. Let me jump in real quickly here. My final quick question for you, because as we see this divide here between two American Muslims, as the group has changed, Muslims come from many different countries, obviously. Do you feel like that has changed recently the agenda as well for American Muslims? This fraction, the fact that it's broken apart into many different groups and subgroups, that this might change the agenda for the group.
Well, Muslims aren't monolithic. I mean, they have lots of different interests in lots of different areas. But there are a lot of political and social ideas that bring us together. And one of those most important ideas are the idea that we should all feel like we belong in the American political discourse. And right now, the Republican Party is not doing that. That's why, even though the Democratic Party might espouse notions and platforms that some people might think that are against our religious or social or more conservative ideals, you still see vast majority of Muslims going towards Democratic Party because inclusion and walking the walk of having these people in your party is way more important than rhetoric about pro-life or anything like that.
All right,
and that's what we see going on in our community.
And we'll leave it there. And without question, there has been a definite flip among many Muslim Americans. Sabah Ahmed with Republican Muslim Coalition and Amer Zahr, law professor at the University of Detroit. Thank you both for joining us tonight for a deeper look.
Thank you.
Thank you.